The conference room felt wrong from the moment Laura Hayes walked inside. She had been to plenty of military briefings before, but this was different. The entire space seemed designed to make humans feel uncomfortable. The ceiling hung low, forcing even average-height people to feel cramped. The lighting was dim and shifted between colors that hurt her eyes. And worst of all, every human in the room was either sitting in chairs that were too small or crouching on the floor. Laura was a military officer, a commander in the Earth Defense Fleet. She had spent 12 years serving on various ships and stations across human space. Her job today was simple. Stand in the background. Look professional. Don't interfere with the diplomats. She was just part of the security detail for the peace talks between humanity and the Cravathi Empire. The Cravathi were aliens who looked nothing like humans. Their bodies were long and close to the ground, with 4 legs that ended in clawed hands. Their heads were wide and flat, with dozens of small eyes that could see in almost every direction at once. When they stood up on their back legs, they were only about 4 feet tall, but they almost never stood up. Their entire culture was built around staying low to the ground. Gregory Cole was the lead diplomat for humanity. He sat in one of the uncomfortable chairs, his body bent forward in what was supposed to be a respectful posture. Around him, the other human diplomats did the same. They all looked miserable, but they kept their faces neutral. This was diplomacy. You had to play by the other side's rules, even when those rules made you want to scream. Across the room, the Cravathi delegates rested in their natural positions. The High Arbiter, their leader, looked relaxed and comfortable. His eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the room and every movement the humans made. When he spoke, a small device on his chest translated his clicking and hissing sounds into English. "We gather to discuss peace," the High Arbiter said. His translated voice was flat and emotionless. But peace requires understanding. Humans do not understand their place in the galaxy. You reach too high. You claim too much. You build upward when you should remain humble. Laura felt her jaw tighten. She was standing near the back wall, trying to make herself smaller like the other security officers. Her legs already hurt from the awkward crouch she was holding, but the words coming from the High Arbiter made her angrier than the physical discomfort. Gregory Cole bowed his head even lower. "High Arbiter, we come here with respect for Cravathi traditions. We acknowledge that our species have different ways of seeing the world. We hope to find common ground." "Common ground," the High Arbiter repeated. The way the translator said it made the words sound like an insult. "You speak of common ground while your colonies spread across space like weeds. You have built settlements on worlds that belong to the Cravathi Empire." "The Deneb colonies were established 70 years ago," Cole said carefully. "Our records show no Cravathi presence in that system. We followed all standard protocols for claiming unclaimed territory." "Unclaimed?" Another Cravathi delegate leaned forward. "We surveyed those worlds 1,700 years ago. Our ancient records document every planet, every moon, every asteroid. They are ours by right of discovery." Laura almost laughed out loud. 1,700 years ago? And they never actually settled those worlds? Never even left a marker? But she kept her mouth shut. Her job was to stand there and look intimidating to anyone who might threaten the diplomats. She was not supposed to have opinions about the negotiation. The talks dragged on. Hour after hour, the pattern repeated. Gregory Cole would make a proposal. The Cravathi would reject it. Cole would make the proposal smaller, offering less and less. The Cravathi would reject it again. It was not a negotiation. It was theater. The Cravathi were enjoying watching the humans bow and scrape and beg for peace. Laura looked at the other humans in the room. A young woman named Karen White sat behind Gregory Cole, her face carefully blank, even though Laura could see the anger in her eyes. Security Officer Paul Grant stood on the opposite wall, his knees bent in a crouch that must have been agonizing after 3 hours. Everyone looked like they wanted to explode. But they all held it together. Because that was what diplomacy required. You swallowed your pride. You bent yourself into uncomfortable positions, both literally and figuratively. You smiled and nodded and agreed to things that made you sick inside. All for the chance at peace. But was this peace? Laura watched the High Arbiter dismiss another human proposal with a wave of his clawed hand. She watched Gregory Cole make himself even smaller, his voice even softer. She watched her own people humiliate themselves for aliens who clearly had no intention of agreeing to anything. 3 years of war had brought them to this point. Human colonies attacked. Cravathi outposts destroyed. Thousands dead on both sides. The fighting had been brutal and pointless, 2 species killing each other over misunderstandings and pride. When the Cravathi finally agreed to peace talks, humanity had jumped at the chance. But looking around this room, Laura wondered if the war had ever really stopped. This was just a different kind of battle. And the humans were losing. Perhaps we could discuss the mining rights in the asteroid belt. Gregory Cole tried again. His voice sounded tired. Both our species need those resources. Surely we can find a way to share. Train. Share. The High Arbiter said. You use that word often. But you do not understand what it means. Sharing requires both parties to have something of value to offer. What do humans offer that the Cravathi Empire needs? The question hung in the air. Laura could see Cole struggling to find an answer. What could humanity offer? They were newer to space travel than the Cravathi. Their technology was less advanced, in many ways. Their territory was smaller. Their ships were fewer. We offer partnership, Cole finally said. The galaxy is large and full of dangers. 2 species working together are stronger than 2 species fighting each other. Partnership. The High Arbiter repeated. He made a sound that the translator could not interpret. But Laura would have bet money it was laughter. You stand tall and speak of partnership when you should be on your knees, begging for mercy. You do not even understand how insulting your very presence is. Look at you. Even trying to show respect, you cannot help but tower over us. You cannot help but remind us of your size, your reach, your arrogance. That was when Laura realized the truth. The Cravathi were never going to make peace. Not real peace. They would string the negotiations along forever, extracting concession after concession, until humanity had given up everything worth having. And even then, they would find new reasons to be offended, new demands to make, because this was not about territory or resources, or even the past war. This was about making humans submit, about forcing humanity to acknowledge Cravathi superiority, about teaching the tall, upward-building humans that they had no place in a galaxy ruled by species who knew how to stay low. Laura's legs were screaming in pain. She had been holding this crouch for 6 hours now, with only one short break. Her back ached. Her knees felt like they might give out any second, and she was not even sitting at the table. She could not imagine how Gregory Cole felt, bent over in that tiny chair for the entire day. And for what? So that the High Arbiter could insult them some more? So that they could give up more colonies, more rights, more dignity, all for the promise of a peace that would never come? Something inside Laura broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a rubber band stretched too far. She could not do this anymore, could not stand here. 3 seconds passed in complete silence. Laura stood there, perfectly still, while every eye in the room stared at her. The Cravathi delegates had frozen in place, their bodies locked in defensive positions. And the High Arbiter simply stared, all his eyes focused on Laura with an intensity that would have been frightening if she had been thinking clearly. But Laura was not thinking clearly. Or maybe she was thinking more clearly than she had in hours. She was tired of bowing. Tired of pretending that making yourself small would somehow earn respect from people who had already decided you were beneath them. She had spent 12 years in the military learning that you had to stand up for yourself and your people, and she was done pretending otherwise. The High Arbiter spoke first. His words came out in rapid clicks and hisses that the translator struggled to keep up with. When the device finally caught up, the English words were sharp and harsh. Challenge. She issues. Challenge. By law of standing, by right of height, this human declares dominance over this gathering. Gregory Cole scrambled to his feet, nearly falling over in his rush. High Arbiter, please. Commander Hayes acted without my permission. This is not an official action by the human delegation. We completely reject any challenge or claim of dominance. Be silent, the High Arbiter snapped. His eyes never left Laura. The challenge is given. It cannot be taken back. In our culture, when one stands over another, they claim authority. Does this human claim authority over you, Gregory Cole? Cole's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Panic. Anger. Calculation. Laura could see him trying to figure out the right answer. If he said yes, he would be admitting she was in charge, which would destroy his authority as lead negotiator. If he said no, he would be saying she did not represent human leadership, which would make the entire delegation look weak and divided. Laura decided to make it easier for him. I claim authority over myself, she said. Her voice was steady, despite the fear starting to creep into her gut. I stand because I choose to. That is how humans work. The Krevathi delegates began clicking and hissing to each other, their voices overlapping in a confusing mess of sound. The translators could not keep up with all of them, talking at once. But Laura did not need a translation to understand their reactions. They were confused, maybe even shocked. You stand by choice? The High Arbiter asked. Not because of rank? Not because you conquered someone? Just by choice, Laura confirmed. Any of us could stand right now if we wanted to. We have been choosing not to because we thought it would respect your customs. But respect should go both ways, High Arbiter. You have spent the last 6 hours telling us that we are arrogant, that we do not know our place. But maybe the problem is not that we do not understand. Maybe the problem is that you refuse to see us as equals. Karen White made a small sound of shock. Paul Grant looked like he was having a heart attack. The other human security officers seemed frozen between the urge to grab Laura and drag her out of the room and the urge to stand up themselves. The High Arbiter's body language changed. Laura had read enough about Krevathi culture to recognize some of their postures. He was still tense, still ready to react if she made any sudden moves. But underneath that, there was something else. Curiosity. Maybe. Or possibly. Respect. You claim we do not see you as equals, the High Arbiter said slowly. Yet you have been in our space, taking our worlds, building your colonies wherever you please. You expand without asking permission. You reach upward with your buildings and your ships. How is this the behavior of one seeking equality rather than dominance? We build upward because that is how we evolved, Laura replied. Humans come from a planet where survival meant standing on 2 legs to see over tall grass, where progress meant building higher to see further. It is not arrogance. It is just what we are. And yet, you have been bowing to us, another Krevathi delegate pointed out, crouching low, making yourselves small. If this goes against your nature, why do it? Laura took a breath. This was the dangerous part. But she had already jumped off the cliff. Might as well see where she landed. Because we can adapt. Humans can stand or sit or crouch or crawl. We can be whatever we need to be. That is our strength. Being flexible. But being flexible does not mean we have no backbone at all. The words hung in the air. Laura could feel sweat running down her back. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. She had just insulted an entire alien species to their faces. There was no coming back from this. Her career was over. She would probably be arrested as soon as they got back to human space. but she could not bring herself to regret it. The High Arbiter was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Laura did not expect. He pushed himself up onto his back legs, raising his front section off the ground. It looked uncomfortable and awkward, like the position was not natural for him. But it brought his eyes closer to Laura's level. "You speak of adaptation," he said. "Yet you stand here in defiance of everything we asked from you." "Because what you asked for was not respect," Laura said. "It was submission. And there is a difference." The translator made a sound that might have been a Cravathi laugh. Bold words from someone who has just broken every rule of this negotiation. "Tell me." Laura Hayes, "Yes. I know your name from our security briefing. What gives you the right to speak when your own diplomat has not given you permission?" It was a fair question. Laura glanced at Gregory Cole, expecting to see anger. Instead, his expression was unreadable. He had stopped trying to apologize or explain. He was just watching, waiting to see what would happen next. "I do not speak for my species," Laura said. "I speak for myself. That is what I am trying to tell you. Among humans, every person has the right to stand up, to speak out, to challenge authority when that authority is wrong. We do not measure worth by how low someone can bow. We measure it by courage, by the willingness to stand when standing is necessary." The High Arbiter's eyes moved to Gregory Cole. "And you allow this? This rebellion from within your own group?" "No." Gregory Cole stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate. He rose from that horrible little chair, straightened his back, and looked the High Arbiter in the eyes. When he spoke, his voice was different than it had been all day. Stronger, more confident. "High Arbiter," Cole said. "Commander Hayes has reminded me of something important. We came here to negotiate peace, not to audition for your approval. If standing tall is a challenge in your culture, then yes. We accept the challenge." One by one, the other humans in the room stood up. Karen White rose from her chair, her hands shaking but her back straight. Paul Grant straightened from his crouch, with a groan of relief. The other security officers did the same. Within seconds, every human in the conference room was standing at their full height. The Cravathi delegates reacted immediately. They drew back, their bodies shifting into positions that Laura recognized as combat-ready. The High Arbiter's claws extended, scraping against the floor. For a moment, Laura thought she had just started a war instead of preventing one. Then the High Arbiter did something that surprised everyone. He pushed himself up on his back legs again, higher this time. It clearly took effort. His legs trembled with the strain, but he held the position, keeping his eyes level with the humans. "You wish to negotiate as equals," he said. The translator caught something in his tone that almost sounded like approval. "Very well. Let us see if you can maintain this position." Laura felt her heart skip. What did that mean? Was he accepting their challenge? Or was this some kind of test? The High Arbiter lowered himself back down to all four legs. "We will take a break," he announced. 30 of your minutes. When we return, we will negotiate under different terms." The Cravathi filed out of the room in perfect formation. As soon as the doors closed behind them, the room erupted in chaos. Several of the human diplomats started talking at once. Karen White looked like she might faint. Paul Grant sat down heavily in the nearest chair, groaning about his knees. Gregory Cole held up his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he turned to Laura. She prepared herself for the worst. Instead, he smiled. "That was either the stupidest or the smartest thing anyone has ever done in diplomatic history," he said. "I am not sure which yet." Laura blinked. "Sir, I apologize for undermining your—" "Save it, Commander," Cole interrupted. He turned to address the whole room. "Everyone listen. We have 30 minutes to figure out what just happened and how to use it to our ad Gregory." Cole paced back and forth across the conference room while the rest of the human delegation tried to process what had just happened. Laura stood against the wall, still not quite believing that she was not in trouble. Her legs ached from hours of crouching, but standing at full height felt like the most natural thing in the world now. "Explain it to me again," Cole said to Karen White. "This rite of elevation. What exactly does it mean?" Karen scrolled through her computer screen, reading quickly. According to the cultural database, the rite of elevation is an ancient Kravathi tradition. When two parties have a serious disagreement that cannot be resolved through normal discussion, they invoke the rite. Each side presents their arguments while maintaining physically challenging positions. The side that demonstrates both physical endurance and logical superiority wins the dispute. And the losing side has to accept the winner's terms? Paul Grant asked from his chair. He was massaging his knees, which had to be killing him after all those hours of crouching. "Yes," Karen confirmed. "Once the rite is invoked, both sides are bound by the outcome. There is no appeal, no second chances. Whatever is decided during the rite becomes final." Cole stopped pacing. So when Commander Hayes stood up, she triggered this rite without knowing it. "It looks that way, sir," Karen said. "The Kravathi see standing over someone as a challenge. By standing up while they remained low, Commander Hayes essentially said that our position was stronger than theirs, that we were willing to prove it through this formal challenge." Laura felt her stomach drop. "I just committed us to a winner-take-all competition with an alien species we barely understand?" "Basically, yes," Cole said. But he was smiling when he said it. "And thank God you did. We were getting nowhere with the old approach. The Kravathi were never going to respect us as long as we were crawling on the floor begging for peace." "But sir," one of the other diplomats spoke up, "a man named Victor Hayes, no relation to Laura. The Kravathi evolved on a high-gravity world. Their bodies are built for endurance in difficult positions. We cannot possibly outlast them in a physical challenge. We do not need to." Cole replied. "Commander Hayes showed us the way. We do not try to beat them at their own game. We play our own game, while they play theirs. They hold their traditional poses. We stand upright. We are not competing to see who can best imitate a Kravathi. We are demonstrating that humans have their own form of strength." Laura started to understand. "It is not about who can crouch the longest. It is about who can defend their position while maintaining whatever stance represents strength for their species." "Exactly," Cole said. "The Kravathi will judge us on two things. Can we endure? And can we argue effectively? We can do both, as long as we stop pretending to be something we are not." Karen was still reading through files. "There is more here, sir. The rite of elevation is considered sacred in Kravathi culture. Invoking it means both sides are deadly serious about resolving the dispute. The Kravathi will not back down now. Whatever we agree to during this rite will define human-Kravathi relations for generations." The weight of that statement settled over the room. Laura had thought she was just standing up because she could not take the humiliation anymore. She had not realized she was binding all of humanity to the outcome of a challenge she barely understood. "Can we win?" Paul asked quietly. Cole looked around at his team. "Can we? That is the real question. The Kravathi have better endurance. Their diplomats train for years in this kind of formal debate. On paper, they have every advantage. On paper, humans were not supposed to survive the Ice Age," Laura said. "We were not supposed to develop technology or make it into space. We have been the underdog before." Cole grinned at her. "That is the spirit. Now, we have about 15 minutes before they come back. We need a strategy. What do we actually want from this negotiation?" The team gathered around the table. For the first time all day, they were not thinking about how to appease the Kravathi. They were thinking about what humanity actually needed. "The Deneb colonies," Karen said immediately. "We cannot abandon 1,000,000 colonists. Recognition of those colonies as human territory is non-negotiable." Quote, "Agreed," Cole said. "What else?" Safety guarantees for our border stations. Paul added. No more Kravathi military exercises in our shipping lanes. No more accidents that destroy our outposts. The list grew quickly. Mining rights in the disputed asteroid fields. Joint control of the communication relay stations. A formal process for resolving future disputes without going to war. Real demands, backed by solid reasoning. We also need to flip their arguments back on them, Laura suggested. They claim the Deneb colonies, based on a survey from 1700 years ago. Make them prove that surveying equals ownership. Challenge every assumption they have been making, Cole nodded approvingly. Aggressive counter-arguments. Make them defend their positions instead of just attacking ours. I like it. Anything else? We need to be ready for them to raise the stakes, Karen warned. The right of elevation is not just about the original dispute. Both sides can expand the scope as the challenge continues. If we push too hard on one issue, they might bring in completely different topics to gain advantage. Then we do the same. Cole decided. If they want to make this about everything, we make it about everything. The whole structure of human Kravathi relations gets decided today. The doors opened. A human attendant poked his head in. Sir, the Kravathi are returning to the conference room. Cole straightened his shirt and looked at his team. Remember, we stand our ground, literally and figuratively. We do not back down. We do not apologize. And we do not give them anything unless they can prove they deserve it. Everyone ready? Laura took a deep breath. Her career had probably ended the moment she stood up. But if she was going down, she might as well go down fighting. The human delegation filed back into the conference room. This time, nobody crouched. Nobody bent over. They walked in standing tall. And they remained standing as the Kravathi delegates entered. The High Arbiter came in last. His eyes swept across the assembled humans, and Laura could have sworn she saw approval in that alien gaze. He moved to his position at the head of the Kravathi delegation and raised himself up onto his back legs again. The position looked even more uncomfortable than before, but he held it steady. We return, the High Arbiter announced. The right of elevation is acknowledged. You stand for your position. We stand for ours. Let the challenge begin. Gregory Cole stepped forward. Laura noticed he had removed his jacket. He stood in just his shirt sleeves, looking less like a polished diplomat and more like someone ready for a fight. High Arbiter, Cole said, his voice strong and clear. We accept the right of elevation, and we have our first challenge for you. Prove that the Deneb colonies belong to the Kravathi Empire. The High Arbiter's eyes gleamed. You want proof? Very well. 1700 years ago, Kravathi survey ships charted that region of space. Our ancient records document every planet in that system. They are ours by right of discovery. 1700 years, Cole repeated. And in all that time, you never colonized those worlds? Never built a single outpost? Never even left a marker to show you had been there? We had no need, another Kravathi delegate said. The worlds were recorded. That is sufficient, under our law. Under your law, Laura spoke up, stepping forward to stand beside Cole. Not under ours. And not under any interpretation of space law that anyone else recognizes. If just looking at something meant you owned it, half the galaxy would belong to whoever invented the telescope. Several of the Kravathi delegates shifted their positions. Laura could not read their body language well enough to know if that was agreement or offense. But they were listening. That was something. The High Arbiter held his elevated position, though Laura could see his legs beginning to tremble slightly from the strain. You speak of space law as if you wrote it. Your species has been traveling among the stars for barely 200 years. We have been doing so for thousands. And in those thousands of years, Cole shot back. How many other species have you established relations with? Because humanity has already made contact with 6 different civilizations, and we are the newcomers. Maybe the problem is not that we do not understand the rules. Maybe the problem is that your rules are outdated. It was a direct attack on Crevathi superiority, and everyone in the room knew it. The other Crevathi delegates began clicking and hissing among themselves. The High Arbiter's eyes narrowed. But there was something in his posture that looked less like anger and more like satisfaction. He was enjoying this. The real argument. The back and forth. This was what the rite of elevation was supposed to be. You believe your youth gives you wisdom? The High Arbiter challenged. That being new to space makes you enlightened, rather than ignorant? I believe being new gives us a different perspective, Cole replied. You have been doing things the same way for so long that you have forgotten there are other ways. We are not trying to destroy your culture, High Arbiter. We are trying to establish our own. And if that means standing when you crouch, or compromising when you compete, or questioning when you assume, well, that is what makes us different species. The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. His elevated position was clearly becoming difficult to maintain. His whole body shook with the effort, but he did not. The next 8 hours tested every limit Laura Hayes thought she had. What started as a confrontation turned into something she had never experienced before. A real negotiation, not the one-sided humiliation from earlier, but an actual exchange between 2 species who were finally treating each other as equals. The Crevathi brought out their evidence for territorial claims. The humans tore it apart piece by piece. When the Crevathi presented their ancient survey data, Karen White pulled up space law from 3 other civilizations. All of them said the same thing. You could not claim a planet just by looking at it. You had to actually use it. Your records show observation, Karen argued, standing at her station with her computer display projected on the wall. Not settlement. Not construction. Not even a message saying you plan to come back. Every legal framework we know says that observation alone does not equal ownership. The High Arbiter clicked thoughtfully. And if we apply this same logic, does that mean humans cannot claim systems you have only observed? Absolutely, Cole agreed without hesitation. We will provide complete documentation of every colony, every outpost, every marker beacon we have established. We claim only what we have actively settled or properly marked for future development. That is the difference. It was a risk. By accepting the stricter standard, humanity gave up potential claims to dozens of star systems they had surveyed, but not colonized. But it also forced the Crevathi to admit that their ancient surveys meant nothing. And they had far more old surveys than actual colonies. The High Arbiter discussed this with his delegation in their clicking language. When he turned back to the humans, Laura had learned to read his posture well enough to see approval. Your proposal has merit, he said. We will acknowledge human control over the Deneb colonies and their stations. In exchange, you will recognize Crevathi control over the Tarsus systems, which we have actively maintained for 3 centuries despite your surveys of the area. Cole did not hesitate. Agreed. What about the disputed asteroid belt between our territories? Shared development, another Crevathi delegate suggested. Both species need the resources. Both species can extract them. We establish rules for joint use rather than fighting over divided ownership. Paul Grant stepped forward. We would need protections. No military ships within 3 light hours of the belt. All mining operations open to inspection by both sides, and a neutral tribunal to resolve disputes. Not Crevathi judges. Not human judges. A third party that has no stake in our conflicts. The negotiations continued like this, point by point. The border stations. The shipping lanes. The communication protocols. Every issue that had caused problems for 3 years got examined from both sides. Whenever the discussion started to go in circles, either the High Arbiter or Gregory Cole would challenge the other to prove their position. It kept the right of elevation alive and kept both sides honest. Laura found herself called on several times to give military perspective. When the Cravathi demanded that human vessels submit to inspection in certain areas, she pushed back hard. "Inspection implies we are criminals," she said. "Like you assume we are smuggling weapons. If you want transparency, let us have real transparency. Your ships, in our space, get scanned. Our ships in your space get scanned. Same rules for everyone. And neither side can force an inspection without probable cause." "Who determines probable cause?" a Cravathi military advisor asked, rising into a defensive posture. "The tribunal we are creating," Laura replied. "Make it part of their job. Either side can flag a vessel as suspicious and present evidence to the tribunal. They decide if an inspection is needed. Takes the decision out of our hands and prevents abuse of the system." The High Arbiter's eyes moved between Laura and his advisor. "You would trust aliens to decide when your ships should be searched?" "If those aliens are truly neutral, yes," Laura said. "We are trusting you to honor this entire agreement, High Arbiter. Trusting a tribunal to be fair seems easier than trusting a former enemy to keep their promises about peace." The High Arbiter made a sound that the translator could not interpret, but Laura would have bet it was laughter. "Well argued. We accept these terms. Mutual inspection, tribunal oversight." The hours blurred together. Coffee appeared at some point. Human assistants were allowed to bring refreshments, though they crouched while serving to respect traditional Cravathi protocols. The Cravathi received some kind of liquid that smelled terrible to human noses but seemed to give them energy. Laura's legs hurt from standing for so long. She had been on her feet for nearly 14 hours now, counting the time before the break. Her back ached. Her knees complained with every small shift of weight, but she refused to sit down. This was still the rite of elevation. Still, a test of endurance, as much as argument. She caught Paul Grant swaying and shot him a warning look. He straightened immediately, gritting his teeth. Around hour 6 of the real negotiation, the High Arbiter called another break. This time, when the Cravathi left the room, the atmosphere was different. They moved like colleagues taking a rest, not enemies planning their next attack. As soon as the doors closed, half the human delegation collapsed into chairs. Laura stayed standing, though she leaned against the wall for support. "We are actually making progress," Karen said, amazement in her voice. "Real progress." Cole was reviewing the agreements on his computer, his face serious. "Do not celebrate yet. We still have the hardest part coming." "What could be harder than everything we have covered already?" Paul asked. "The Military Non-Aggression Pact," Cole said quietly. "We can agree on colonies and asteroids all day, but until we have a formal structure to prevent military conflict, all of this is just words on paper. And that is where both sides have the most to lose." Laura pushed off from the wall. "The Cravathi have more ships than we do. Better weapons in some categories. They will not want to limit their military advantage. And we will not want to limit our ability to defend our people," Karen added. "It is an impossible problem." Cole looked up from his computer. "Which is why we are not going to approach it as a limitation. We are going to propose an alliance." The word seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Alliance. With the Cravathi. With a species that had been destroying human outposts just months ago. "Sir," Paul said carefully, "I do not think either side is ready for that." "Ready or not, it is the only way forward," Cole insisted. "Think about it. We both know there are other species in this part of space, some of them much more aggressive than we have been with each other. The Vorquin Collective has been making threatening moves toward this sector. The Cecil hives are always looking to expand. If humanity and the Cravathi are fighting each other, we are both vulnerable to outside threats. On Hops, Cecil hives, we are both vulnerable to outside threats." Laura felt cold understanding wash over her. She remembered intelligence briefings about the Vorkin, brutal, expansionist, completely willing to conquer anyone weaker than themselves. "You want to propose a defensive pact." "More than that," Cole said. I want to propose a joint military command, limited in scope, focused on mutual defense and border security. Both sides contribute ships and personnel. Both sides have equal authority in command decisions. It protects us both and forces us to cooperate, which means we cannot slide back into hostility without destroying something we both invested in building. The High Arbiter will never agree, Karen said. The Cravathi do not share command with anyone. Their entire military culture is based on strict hierarchy. Then we challenge him to prove there is no benefit in cooperation, Cole replied. This is still the right of elevation. We present our position and dare him to tear it down. If he cannot, he has to accept it according to the rules of his own tradition. It was bold. Maybe crazy. But as Laura thought about it, she realized it might work. The Cravathi respected strength, but they also respected strategic thinking. Proposing an alliance was not weakness. It was recognizing a larger threat and being smart enough to set aside smaller conflicts for survival. When the Cravathi returned, the High Arbiter immediately sensed something had changed. His eyes swept across the human delegation, reading their body language. You have a new proposal, he stated, not a question. Cole nodded and stepped forward. We do. And it is going to challenge everything both our species assume about each other. Then present it, the High Arbiter commanded, raising himself again into that uncomfortable, elevated position. His delegation did the same. Preparing for the crucial phase, Cole laid out the proposal in clear terms. A joint military command, shared border patrols, coordinated defense against outside threats, equal contribution, equal authority, equal risk. The Cravathi delegation erupted in agitated clicking. The High Arbiter's posture shifted rapidly, expressing shock, consideration, resistance, calculation, all in quick succession. Impossible, one of the Cravathi generals declared. You ask us to combine our forces with yours? To take orders from human commanders? Gregory Cole continued speaking, his voice firm and clear despite the exhaustion that must have been pulling at him. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but it is coming. High Arbiter. We have already had 3 years of border fighting. How long before one of those incidents gets out of control? How long before a nervous commander on either side turns a misunderstanding into a massacre? We are both strong enough to hurt each other badly. But neither of us is strong enough to win cleanly. So we either find a way to work together, or we bleed each other until the Vorquin, or the Cecil, or whoever else comes next, picks through what is left of us. The silence that followed was complete. Laura could hear her own breathing, feel sweat running down her back from standing so long. This was the moment where everything would be decided. Everything balanced on what the High Arbiter said next. The High Arbiter lowered himself slowly to his natural position. For a second, Laura thought he was giving up, that the physical strain had become too much. But then she saw his eyes and understood. He was not surrendering. He was conceding the argument. You argue well, Gregory Cole, the High Arbiter said quietly. You have identified the central weakness in both our positions and offered a solution that requires bravery from both sides. That is true wisdom. He turned to his delegation and spoke rapidly in Cravathi. The clicking and hissing went on for several minutes. Laura watched the body language of the other Cravathi. She saw resistance, saw doubt, but gradually, she also saw acceptance. Finally, the High Arbiter turned back to face the humans. We accept your proposal, but with conditions. The Joint Command will start with limited scope, border patrols only, for a trial period of 2 years. If both sides prove capable of working together, the arrangement can expand. If either side proves untrustworthy, the agreement ends and we return to separate forces. Do you agree? Cole extended his hand. Agreed. This time the handshake was solid and confident. Around them, both delegations visibly relaxed. Not completely. There was still too much history, too much distrust for that, but enough to suggest that real peace might actually be possible. There are still many details to work out, the High Arbiter noted. Ship assignments, command rotations, rules for engagement. This will take time. We have time, Cole said. For the first time in 3 years, we actually have time. Laura felt something release in her chest. They had done it. Against every expectation, against all the cultural barriers and old grudges, they had found a path forward. The negotiations continued into the night, but everything had changed. They were no longer enemies looking for advantage. They were allies, uncertain and tentative, but allies working out the practical details of cooperation that had never been tried before. And it had all started because one person decided to stand up. 3 months later, Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the HMS Vigilance, watching her view screen as a Cravathi battlecruiser moved into perfect formation alongside her ship. It still felt strange, seeing those angular alien vessels flying in coordination with human destroyers instead of shooting at them. Cravathi Cruiser Dominance reports ready for patrol, her communications officer announced. Commander Vex sends his greetings. Laura smiled slightly. Vex, whose real name was an impossible series of clicks that the translator simplified, had been doubtful about the joint command at first. 3 months of shared patrols had changed that. He still challenged every tactical decision Laura made, but she had learned that was normal for Cravathi officers. Constant testing kept everyone alert. Return his greetings, Laura said. And confirm our patrol pattern. I want both ships scanning that asteroid cluster carefully. Intelligence reports say Vorquin scouts have been testing the border. The Vorquin had been an unexpected problem. Within weeks of the human Cravathi peace treaty being announced, the Vorquin collective started probing their space, obviously hoping to exploit any remaining tensions. Instead, they found a united front. The first joint patrol had intercepted a Vorquin scout and sent it running with a very clear message. This sector was defended. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Chris Martin, approached with a computer tablet. Commander, we just received new patrol coordinates from Central Command. They want us to extend our route into Sector 447. Laura frowned. That is deeper into the disputed zone than usual. Why? Cravathi intelligence detected strange energy readings. Could be nothing. Could be cloaked ships. Central Command wants it investigated before the colony transports pass through next week. Central Command. Even that phrase was new. The joint military authority established during the peace talks now coordinated operations for both species. It was based on Valaris Station, the same neutral ground where the negotiations happened, and staffed equally by humans and Cravathi. It was messy. The two species had different command structures, different tactical approaches, different technologies. Arguments happened frequently, but somehow it was working. Send the coordinates to the Dominance, Laura ordered. We will do the extended patrol together. We will do the extended patrol together. As her crew implemented the new route, Laura's mind went back to that day in the conference room. Standing up had seemed so simple. An almost automatic rejection of the humiliation they were enduring. She had not known it would trigger the rite of elevation, had not known that challenging the Cravathi would earn their respect instead of their anger. Gregory Cole had explained it later, during the celebration after the treaty was signed. You gave them what they were waiting for, he said. A reason to take us seriously. They were never going to make peace with people who would not even stand up for themselves. Once you proved we would stand, literally and figuratively, they could treat us as equals. Laura had been promoted after that, made commander of the Vigilance, one of the first ships assigned to the Joint Patrol Force. Some called it a reward. Others whispered it was a way to keep watch on her in case her impulsive actions caused more problems. Laura figured it was probably both. Commander, her sensor officer called out. The Dominance is picking up those energy readings, confirming 3 contacts, possibly 4. Configuration: unknown. Laura's training kicked in immediately. Battle stations: send our position to Central Command and request backup. Communications: open a channel to Commander Vex. The view screen split to show the Cravathi Bridge. Commander Vex was in his command position, low to the deck as proper for his species, but his whole body radiated alertness. You see them too, Hayes? We do. Your thoughts? We investigate, Vex said with typical Cravathi directness. But carefully. The Vorquin use ambush tactics. Agreed. Standard approach. My ship takes point. Yours provides cover if needed. If they are hostile, we fall back to defensive formation and wait for reinforcements. Vex's eyes gleamed with what Laura had learned to read as approval. A good strategy. Moving into position. The two ships advanced together, scanners sweeping the asteroid cluster where the energy readings came from. Laura watched the tactical display, every sense alert. Beside her, Chris Martin had his hand ready over the weapons controls, prepared to activate shields instantly. Contacts resolving, the sensor officer reported. 4 ships. Configuration matches Vorquin Scout class. They are withdrawing, Commander. Moving away from our position. At high speed. Laura felt satisfaction surge through her. They saw 2 ships working together and decided they did not like the odds. Keep tracking them until they leave sensor range. I want to know if they try to circle back. Commander Vex is calling, the communications officer said. Laura nodded for them to connect. Vex appeared on screen, and if a Cravathi could smile, she thought he might be. The Vorquin run from our combined strength, Vex observed. This is good. They learn that this sector is no longer weak. And divided. They will return, Laura cautioned. Then we will meet them with more ships as well, Vex replied. This is the purpose of our alliance, yes? To be stronger together than apart. It was such a simple statement. But it captured everything they had been building. Laura remembered the years of tension. The fighting. The lives lost on both sides. All because neither species had been willing to see the other as anything but an enemy. And then she stood up. The patrol continued without further incident. The Vorquin scouts had fled the sector, and the strange energy readings faded as the unknown ships retreated to wherever they had been staging from. By the time Laura's shift ended and she handed command to her night officer, the area was secure. In her quarters, Laura reviewed the latest reports from other joint patrol groups. The results were mixed. Some partnerships worked smoothly, like hers with Vex. Others struggled with cultural misunderstandings and disagreements about tactics. 2 groups had nearly fought each other over a perceived insult that turned out to be a translation mistake, but they were all still trying. That was what mattered. Going back to the hostility and violence that defined human-Cravathi relations before the peace talks was unthinkable now. Both species had invested too much in making the alliance work. Laura's communication system chimed. Incoming message from Valaris Station, marked as priority. She opened it and saw Gregory Cole's face. Commander Hayes, he greeted her with a smile. Just finished my shift, actually, Laura replied. What can I do for you, Ambassador? Cole had been promoted too, made Chief Human Representative at the Joint Command Headquarters. I wanted to give you advance warning about something. It will be announced publicly tomorrow, but I thought you should know first, given your unique role in all this. Cole's expression became more serious. The High Arbiter and I have been in talks with the Cecil Hives. They have been watching how the Human-Cravathi Alliance developed, and they are interested in exploring a similar arrangement. Laura sat up straighter. The Cecil? They are even more isolated than the Cravathi were. Were is the key word, Cole noted. They apparently concluded that the old way of species keeping to themselves and occasionally fighting over resources is not sustainable anymore. The galaxy is getting more crowded. Aggressive species like the Vorquin are not going to respect isolation. The Cecil want to join what we have built. What does the High Arbiter think? He is cautiously supportive. He sees it as proof that the approach we took works. That cooperation beats confrontation. Of course, he is also concerned about Cravathi influence being reduced if we expand the alliance too quickly. But that is a political issue for another day. Laura processed this information. You are talking about turning a two-species alliance into something bigger. A coalition of multiple species. Exactly, Cole confirmed. And it all started because one stubborn commander refused to stay crouched on the floor. Laura felt her face heat up. Sir, I did not do anything special. You stood up. Cole interrupted. And in doing so, you changed everything. The Cravathi respect strength, but they respect genuine conviction even more. You showed them that humans would not be pushed around, but you also showed them we were willing to meet them as equals rather than trying to dominate them. That is a difficult balance. And you found it perfectly. I got lucky. Laura protested. Maybe, Cole allowed. But you also read the situation correctly when every briefing told you to do the opposite. That is not luck, Commander. That is instinct. And that is why I am recommending you for the new multi-species tactical coordination position we are creating. Laura blinked. What position? We need someone to help bring new species into our joint military framework. Someone who understands both human and Cravathi perspectives. Someone who has practical experience making the alliance work. Someone who will not back down when challenged but also will not make things worse unnecessarily. The High Arbiter specifically asked for you. He did? His exact words, through the translator, were that the human who stands with wisdom should help others learn to stand as well. I think that is high praise from a Cravathi. Laura's mind raced, leaving the vigilance, taking a role that involved diplomacy as much as military work, dealing not just with Cravathi, but potentially with Cecil and whoever else joined the growing alliance. It was terrifying. It was exactly the kind of challenge she never thought she wanted. I will do it, she heard herself say. Cole grinned. I hoped you would say that. Report to Velaris Station in 2 weeks. Oh, and Commander, you might want to practice standing for even longer periods. Diplomatic functions with the Cecil apparently involve a lot of standing around. They are even taller than we are. After Cole ended the call, Laura sat in her quarters, looking at the stars through her viewport. 3 months ago, she had been nobody special, an officer assigned to a diplomatic mission she did not care about. Now, she was about to help shape the future of cooperation between species, all because she decided to stand up. She thought about Earth and the human tendency to rise to challenges, to adapt and overcome obstacles. But she also thought about the Cravathi and their emphasis on proving worth through endurance and strong argument, about how both species had been locked in mutual misunderstanding until she, found a way to bridge the gap. Maybe that was humanity's real strength. Not just standing tall, but knowing when to stand and when to bow, when to challenge and when to cooperate, when to be flexible and when to be firm. The galaxy was changing. The old patterns of isolated species jealously protecting their territories were giving way to something new, something built on mutual respect and shared strength. And Laura Hayes, the woman who crashed peace talks by simply standing up, was going to help build it. She pulled up the personnel files for the vigilance. She would need to recommend someone to replace her as commander, someone with good instincts, someone who could work with Vex and the other Cravathi officers. Someone who understood that sometimes the most important thing you could do was stand up for what you believed in, even when everything told you to stay down. 2 weeks later, Laura stood in a conference room on Velaris Station. It was the same room where the historic peace talks had happened, but it looked different now. The furniture had been redesigned to accommodate both human and Cravathi delegates comfortably. The lighting was adjustable to suit different species. And most importantly, there were no rules about who had to crouch and who could stand. The Cecil delegation entered the room. Laura had seen pictures, but actually meeting them in person was something else. They were insect-like beings, with long, segmented bodies that stood upright on 4 legs. Their heads were small and triangular, with compound eyes that glittered in the light. When fully upright, they stood nearly 7 feet tall. The lead Cecil, whose name the translator rendered as Click Whisper, looked around the room with apparent curiosity. Their eyes focused on Laura. "You are the human who stood," Click Whisper said. The translator gave them a melodious voice that seemed at odds with their appearance. "We have heard the story, how you defied your own people and the Cravathi to establish proper respect." "I just stood up," Laura said simply. "Sometimes, that is all it takes." "Among the Cecil, standing is also important," Click Whisper replied. "But we have learned to stand alone, in isolation. Watching your alliance with the Cravathi, we realized that standing together might be stronger than standing alone." The High Arbiter entered the room. He moved to his position at the table, and Laura noticed he did not raise himself into that uncomfortable, elevated posture. He simply took his natural position and looked at the Cecil delegation with respect. "Welcome to Valaris Station," the High Arbiter said. "We gather to discuss expanding our alliance, to determine if 3 species can work together, as well as 2 have learned to." Gregory Cole arrived with the rest of the human delegation. He nodded to Laura, acknowledging her new role. She was no longer just security. She was now the tactical coordinator, responsible for helping integrate new members into the joint military structure. "Shall we begin?" Cole asked, taking his seat. The Cecil delegates remained standing. The Cravathi remained in their low positions. The humans sat comfortably in their chairs. 3 different postures, 3 different species, all in the same room trying to build something unprecedented. Laura thought back to that moment 3 months ago, when she simply could not take it anymore. When crouching felt like giving up everything that made humanity strong. She had stood up without knowing what it would trigger, without understanding the cultural significance. But maybe that was the point. She had not stood up because she understood Cravathi culture. She had stood up because she understood human nature. The need to face challenges head on. The refusal to accept humiliation as the price of peace. The belief that real respect had to be mutual, or it was not respect at all. And somehow, that simple act of defiance had become the foundation of something bigger than she ever imagined. The discussions began. The Cecil wanted to understand the joint patrol system. They had questions about command structure, about how disputes were resolved, about what happened when human and Cravathi tactical approaches conflicted. Laura answered their questions, drawing on her months of experience working with Vex. "The key is recognizing that different is not wrong," she explained. "Humans like direct approaches. Cravathi prefer careful observation before action. Cecil, from what I understand, value precision and coordination. None of these approaches is better than the others. They are just different. The trick is learning when to use which approach." "And who decides?" Click Whisper asked. "We all do," Laura said. "Together. That is what makes it work. Not one species imposing their will on the others, but all of us contributing our perspectives and finding the best solution for each specific situation." The High Arbiter clicked in agreement. "Well said. This is what we have learned from our alliance with humanity. That our way is not the only way. That sometimes the human approach works better, and that admitting this does not make us weak." The talks continued through the day. There were disagreements, moments of confusion when cultural differences created misunderstandings. But there was also progress, real, substantive progress toward expanding the alliance. During a break, Gregory Cole pulled Laura aside. "I am just telling them what I learned from working with Vex," Laura said. "You are doing more than that," Cole replied. "You are showing them that cooperation is possible, that it works. They can hear the theory all day. But seeing someone who actually lived it, who made it work in practice, that is what convinces them." Laura looked through the window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, the Vorquin were watching. The Cecil hives were deciding. Other species were evaluating whether this new alliance was a threat or an opportunity. The galaxy was changing, and humanity, the species that had barely been in space for 2 centuries, was helping to lead that change, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple revolutionary act of treating other species as equals, all because one person decided that enough was enough. That bowing and scraping was not respect. That real peace could only come from mutual recognition of worth and strength. Laura Hayes smiled as she returned to the conference room. She had crashed the peace talks when she simply stood up, and in doing so, she had helped build something that might just change the galaxy forever. Outside the window, the stars shone steady and bright, lighting the way to a future built on cooperation instead of conflict. A future where different species stood together, each in their own way, united in strength and purpose. The new order was just beginning. Yes, Laura agreed. Commander Vex, once we finish this patrol, what do you think about a joint training exercise? Our crews could use practice coordinating under combat conditions. Vex's posture shifted in a way Laura had learned meant pleasure. An excellent idea. I will create a scenario. You defend a convoy while my ship plays Vorquin Raiders. We test your defensive formations. And next week we switch roles, Laura countered. Fair is fair. Agreed. You learn quickly, Hayes. For a human who stands when she should crouch, you show wisdom in knowing when to adapt. Laura laughed. And you have learned that sometimes standing is the right choice, even when it goes against tradition. Perhaps, Vex admitted. Or perhaps we both learned that there are different kinds of strength. Your people stand tall and face threats directly. My people move low and watch before striking. Together we see from both positions, high and low, direct and careful. This makes us hard to defeat, and we would take orders from Cravathi commanders. Laura said. That is what equal authority means. Neither side is subordinate. We work as partners. End in TTNC, end in Flive Mary. When TTNC, end in Flive Mary. The Cravathi do not have partners, the general snapped. We have servants, or we have rivals. You propose we become neither, which makes no sense. Then expand your understanding, Cole challenged. You have spent this entire negotiation telling us that humans are arrogant, that we do not understand proper order. Well, here is your chance to prove your own wisdom. Show us that the Cravathi are smart enough to recognize when cooperation serves you better than conquest. The High Arbiter was shaking from the strain of his elevated posture. But he held it. His eyes locked on Cole. You speak of wisdom, of strategy. Yet, you ask us to trust a species we barely know, to put our ships under partial command of your officers. How is this wisdom and not foolishness? Because the alternative is mutual destruction, Cole said bluntly, Ower himself. Instead, he spoke carefully, his words translated with unusual precision. You argue well, Gregory Cole. And you, Laura Hayes, you have shown something today that we did not expect from humans. He paused, and then slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself back to his natural position. You have shown that you understand the difference between submission and respect. That is worthy of acknowledgement. Laura felt her heart racing. Was this victory? Or just the beginning of something bigger? The rite of elevation continues, the High Arbiter said. But we will negotiate as equals now. You will stand. We will assume our natural positions. And we will determine together what peace between our peoples truly means. Antaj. Karen. Pull up everything we have on Cravathi challenge rituals. Paul. Contact our ship and put them on standby in case we need emergency extraction. The rest of you, start working on new proposals. Real ones this time. Not the garbage we have been offering all day. Laura felt dizzy. This was not the reaction she had expected. She had expected to be arrested, maybe court-martialed. Instead, Gregory Cole was treating her act of defiance like some kind of brilliant strategy. "Sir," Karen said, looking up from her computer, "I am finding references to something called the Rite of Elevation. It is a Kravathi tradition for resolving disputes. When two groups disagree, they engage in a formal challenge, where representatives argue their positions while holding difficult physical poses. Whoever holds their position longest while making the strongest argument wins the dispute." Cole's expression changed. Understanding dawned in his eyes. They are not angry that we stood up. They are satisfied that we finally did. And watch her species crawl for aliens who would never respect them, no matter how low they bowed. Laura Hayes straightened up. She rolled her shoulders back. She stood at her full height, 6 feet tall, and she stopped trying to make herself smaller. The effect was immediate. Every Kravathi in the room reacted like she had pulled out a gun. They reared back, their eyes going wide. The High Arbiter made a sound of shock that the translator did not even try to interpret. Across the table, Gregory Cole turned white as a sheet. "Commander Hayes," Cole said, his voice sharp with panic. "Stand down. Now." Laura looked at him. Looked at this man who had spent 6 hours bent over like a beggar. Looked at the other humans. All of them twisted into uncomfortable positions because they were afraid of offending the Kravathi. "No," Laura said. Her voice was quiet, but in the shocked silence of the room, everyone heard it clearly. The peace talks crashed when she simply stood up, and nothing would ever be the same again.